Have you ever like stumbled upon something, an idea maybe, or a piece of art, and it just kind of stops you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you found, I don't know, like a hidden frequency or something, you tune into it,
Hmm.
and suddenly everything looks a little different.
Right.
That's the kind of feeling we're going for today as we dive into the world of
Bob Camblin.
Bob Camblin.
That's right.
So Bob Camblin is an artist who is both celebrated and elusive.
Very much so.
And we have gathered a rich collection of materials to help us explore his work in life.
That's right.
So we've got excerpts from his own writings, biographical accounts, exhibition history, different interpretations of his art.
Right.
And so our goal for this deep dive is to really extract from all these sources the core insights
Yeah.
and to uncover those recurring themes in Camblin's work and life that offer you a unique perspective on art,
Mm-hmm.
creativity, and maybe even the nature of reality itself.
That's right. I think one of the things that you find when you first start to look at Camblin is that he is described as this widely recognized but enigmatic figure.
Okay.
And they even call him a mystical trickster figure. So you know somebody that is playing with perception right from the get-go.
Okay. So to add to that, it seems like his actual artwork is pretty scarce and highly sought after.
Yeah, it's both scarce and in high demand.
Which makes you wonder what's so special about these pieces
Right.
that they command that level of attention.
Well, and part of the scarcity comes from this interesting fact that he stepped away from academia.
Okay.
Who actually was a teacher. He had teaching positions, but he stepped away from that to lead a nomadic life devoted entirely to his art.
Wow. That's a huge decision to just leave that security for the
Yeah.
uncertainty of being on the road.
Yeah, and it really speaks to his commitment to his art, or maybe even a rejection of convention.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how that might have impacted his work.
And then there's also this thing where he signs his work as anonymous or anonymous artists.
Mm-hmm.
What is that all about?
Well, I think if you tie that in with the idea of being an enigmatic figure, it kind of goes along with this idea of stepping outside of the ego
Okay.
and having art be a form of collective expression rather than an individual's expression.
So it's not about him, it's about something bigger than him.
Yeah, something bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost makes you think about how do you look at a piece of art differently when you don't know who made it?
Right.
Does it change your perception at all?
Right. Does it shift the focus onto the work itself?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let's put aside the mystery surrounding the man himself for a moment and delve into some of those core philosophical themes
Okay.
that emerge from these quotes, because clearly this guy was grappling with some pretty profound ideas.
Absolutely. One of the things that you see popping up again and again is this interplay between science and magic. And he doesn't look at them as opposing forces, but rather as two different ways of looking at the same reality. He talks about seeking a bright gray, and that gray comes to what he calls common sense and the perfectly average.
That's a really cool image, a bright gray where science and magic meet. It suggests a space beyond strict logic,
Yeah.
where intuition and empirical observation can coexist.
Exactly.
And he saw common sense and the perfectly average as paths to this bright gray.
Yeah. It's a fascinating juxtaposition, isn't it? Because you would think that, this esoteric knowledge
Yeah.
would be where you find that.
Yeah.
But he's saying, no, you need to find this in the everyday. And by grounding yourself in what seems ordinary,
Right.
then you start to perceive these extraordinary aspects
Wow.
of both the scientific and the magical realms.
So basically saying look for the magic and the science in the everyday.
Yeah, and the stuff that's right in front of you.
That's pretty cool. That connects really well with his emphasis on intuition. Doesn't it? He says the sixth sense is to be without a doubt.
Senza dubio.
Yeah.
It's not just like a fleeting feeling, but a deep conviction, a knowing.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond reason. It's about trusting that inner voice.
Have you ever had that kind of certainty
Oh, yeah?
about something, even without having like concrete proof?
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. He also seemed to be very connected to nature. He talks about finding something in nature that completes you
Yeah.
and then surrendering to it.
It's almost like a meditative practice.
Yeah.
There's a real humility in that statement,
Yeah.
recognizing nature's power and our place within it,
Right.
letting go and control,
Yeah.
and finding that peace in just being.
Does that idea of surrender resonate with you at all?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially when I'm out in nature.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And it's like you're giving yourself over to something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting how his view on the purpose of art seems to have evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about a shift from art for art's sake to
Right.
art for life's sake, or even art for survival's sake.
It's a big jump.
That's a really significant change in perspective. What do you think that means?
Well, it seems like he's critiquing art that is disconnected from life.
Okay.
And by saying art is for life or survival,
Yeah.
he's advocating for art that has an impact, that has a function beyond just being aesthetically pleasing.
So it's not just pretty, it needs to actually do something.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what survival meant to him in this context.
Right. Was it physical survival, emotional survival, spiritual survival?
Well, is it political?
Yeah. There are so many different ways to interpret that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the purpose of art
Well, I think
in your own life?
I think for me, art is a way of connecting with something larger than myself.
Okay.
It's a way of finding meaning and beauty in the world.
It sounds like Camblin was very much on a similar path.
I think so.
He also had this interesting idea about stepping off the train of thought to find power.
Yeah, that's a really evocative
I mean,
image.
what is, isn't it? It's very active and almost disruptive.
Yeah, like you're derailing your own thinking.
Yeah.
And he's suggesting that our habitual way of thinking can be limiting.
Okay.
And that by intentionally disrupting that flow, by stepping outside of those mental tracks, we can access a different kind of power.
A power that's not coming from like intellectual struggle,
Right.
but from something else.
It's like a mental stillness or a sudden shift in perspective.
Can you think of a time when you consciously stopped your train of thought and it led to some new insight?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that happens all the time when you're working on a creative project.
Okay.
You know, you get stuck and then you just have to walk away.
Step off the train.
Step off the train, exactly. And then when you come back to it,
Yeah.
you have fresh perspective.
And then he pairs that with this idea that when you think, don't act,
Right.
and when you act, don't think.
Yeah, that's a real challenge.
It is. It sounds like a call for a more intuitive, less overanalyzed engagement with the world.
Exactly like trusting your gut
Yeah.
and not getting caught up in your head.
In your own life, do you tend to overthink things or act impulsively?
I think I'm more of an overthinker.
Okay, me too. There are so many little gems of wisdom scattered throughout these quotes.
Oh, yeah?
He talks about balance, patience, freedom,
Mm.
and the importance of silence for maintaining reality.
Silence is a big one for him.
What do you think he means by that?
I think he's saying that we need to create space for silence in our lives,
Okay.
to allow the noise of the world to subside.
So that we can actually hear what's real.
Exactly.
How do you incorporate silence into your own life?
Well, I try to meditate every day,
Okay.
even if it's just for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And I also find that spending time in nature is really helpful.
Yeah.
Just being in a quiet place where I can hear the birds singing and the wind blowing.
That makes sense. And then he delves into these complex emotions like love moving to indifference to protect itself.
That's an interesting take on love.
It is, isn't it? It's a little unconventional and maybe even a bit cynical.
Yeah, but I think there's some truth to it.
Okay.
Love can be very vulnerable,
Yeah.
and sometimes we need to protect ourselves from getting hurt.
So indifference is a form of self-preservation.
Maybe so?
Can you think of a time when you've experienced that?
I think we've all been there.
Yeah, probably.
Uh,
He also had an appreciation for the overlooked.
mm,
He appreciated the sublime in the ridiculous
right.
and encouraged us to look for the forgotten.
It's like he's saying pay attention to the details,
Yeah.
the things that most people overlook.
Have you ever found something extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Mm.
I think that's one of the joys of being an artist,
Yeah.
is finding beauty in unexpected places.
And his thoughts on communication are pretty insightful, too.
Mm-hmm.
He says, if you argue or if you agree, you might learn,
Right.
but you do not communicate.
So what is communication then?
Right. What does he see as true communication?
I think he's saying that true communication is about understanding.
Okay.
It's about connecting with another person on a deeper level.
So it's not about being right or wrong.
No, it's about empathy.
How often do your conversations feel like true communication rather than just an exchange of opinions?
I think it's rare,
Yeah,
but it's something to strive for.
definitely.
Yeah.
He also used these wonderful metaphors for life and change, like the open gate, broken fence,
Mm-hmm.
and then the contrasting ideas of revolution versus evolution.
Right.
What do you make of those metaphors?
Well, the open gate with the broken fence suggests that there are no real boundaries,
Okay.
that the search continues even when traditional structures have failed.
Mm.
And the contrast between revolution and evolution,
Yeah.
highlights two different ways of looking at change.
Okay.
Revolution is sudden and disruptive,
Right.
while evolution is gradual and organic.
And he seems to be suggesting that we need both.
Yeah, we need to be able to adapt to change,
Yeah.
but we also need to hold on to our values.
That's a good point. Which of those metaphors resonates more with your own experience of change?
I think I'm more drawn to the idea of evolution.
Okay.
I believe that change happens gradually over time,
Yeah,
and that we need to be patient and persistent in our efforts.
that makes sense. And then there are these almost haiku-like observations that are peppered throughout his writings.
Yeah, like little glimpses into his mind.
They capture these fleeting moments in nature and everyday life.
It's like he's trying to slow down time
Yeah.
and appreciate the beauty of the present moment.
One of the most intriguing themes is his exploration of mirrors, self-perception, and the nature of reality.
Right.
He famously said, "Everyone is a mirror, and that is magic."
That's a powerful statement.
It is. What do you make of it?
Well, I think he's saying that we see ourselves reflected in others,
Okay.
and that in turn, we act as mirrors for them.
So it's a constant feedback loop.
Exactly, and that this mirroring is what creates the magic of human interaction.
It's a beautiful way to think about relationships.
It is, isn't it?
It makes you realize how interconnected we all are.
Yeah, and how our actions and words can have a profound impact on others.
He also distinguishes between magic for power, which he sees as negative,
Right.
and magic for seeing, which is positive.
And that seeing is linked to understanding and art.
Okay, I'm curious to hear more about this distinction.
Well, I think magic for power is about manipulation and control.
Okay.
It's about using knowledge for personal gain.
So it's selfish.
Yeah, it's ego-driven.
Okay.
Whereas magic for seeing is about enhancing our perception.
Okay.
It's about seeing the world more clearly.
And he sees art as a form of magic for seeing.
Exactly. Art can help us to understand ourselves and the world around us better.
How might you apply this distinction in your own life?
Well, I think it's important to be aware of our motivations
Okay.
when we're using knowledge or power.
Right. Are we using it to help others?
Or are we using it to benefit ourselves?
That's a good question to ask ourselves. He also touches on the fleeting nature of artistic novelty and the artist's dilemma in a consumer-driven art culture.
Right. It's like this tension between the need to innovate
Yeah.
and the fact that society gets bored so easily.
You ever feel that pressure to constantly create something new?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to stay true to your own vision
Mm-hmm.
and not get caught up in trends.
And he grapples with this idea of belief versus knowing,
Yep.
emphasizing the importance of both intuition and logic, but suggesting that mystics know something else beyond mere belief.
It's like there's a different kind of knowing that
Right.
goes beyond the rational mind.
Have you ever experienced that?
I think so.
Like a knowing that you can't explain?
Yeah, it's hard to put into words.
His perspective on history is interesting, too.
Mm-hmm.
He says that it's believable when it's creative,
Right?
and that awareness can soften the shock of reality.
So history is a story that we tell ourselves.
And the more creative that story is,
Yeah.
the more believable it becomes.
And the more aware we are,
Yeah.
the less shocked we'll be by what happens in life.
That's a good point. He even has a take on cynicism,
Yeah.
viewing it as a type of creativity gone destructive and ego-oriented.
It's a sharp observation.
It is. So cynicism is a form of creativity.
But it's a negative form.
Right.
It's driven by ego and it's destructive.
Do you see any cynicism in your own life?
I think we all have moments of cynicism.
Yeah.
It's important to be aware of it
Yeah.
and to try to counter it with positivity.
He also stresses the importance of process and awareness over the end result, saying that process and awareness cannot be failure.
That's a liberating idea.
It is, isn't it? It takes the pressure off.
Yeah, it allows us to focus on the journey
Right.
rather than the destination.
How might you apply this philosophy to a current challenge you're facing?
Well, I'm working on a new project right now,
Okay.
and it's been really challenging.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to focus on the process and to enjoy the learning experience.
Even if the end result isn't what I originally envisioned.
Exactly.
And he doesn't shy away from critiquing the art world itself.
No, he's very outspoken about his views.
He calls for a return to a naive approach to art. And he laments the influence of history, critics, and a very affluent but weird culture.
He's basically saying that the art world has become too intellectualized.
Okay.
and that it's lost touch with its roots.
So what does he mean by a naive approach?
I think he's talking about approaching art with a sense of wonder and curiosity,
Okay.
without preconceived notions or expectations.
Have you ever felt that your perception of art was influenced by external factors?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think we're all influenced by the things we read and hear.
Yeah.
It's hard to come to a piece of art with a completely blank slate.
He talks about his own art as a puzzle that wants to be solved, with traps and hidden meanings.
He wants to make you think,
Yeah.
to question your assumptions.
He aims to evoke subjective states of mind and question our expectations of reality.
He's not giving you easy answers.
No, he's making you work for it.
Exactly.
When you encounter a piece of art, are you more inclined to look for easy answers or to embrace the puzzle?
I think I'm more of a puzzle person.
Okay.
I like to figure things out,
Yeah.
to dig beneath the surface.
He mentions Goya and Cézanne as influences, two very different artists.
Yeah, one's dark and psychological,
Right.
and the other is more focused on structure and perception.
What can we learn from those influences?
Well, I think it tells us that Camblin was interested in both the emotional and the intellectual aspects of art.
Okay.
He wanted to create work that was both moving and thought-provoking.
That makes sense. He also has this recurring image of muddy water settling, turning stumbling blocks into stepping stones.
And that's symbolized by jars of water in his paintings.
It's a beautiful metaphor for how challenges can lead to growth.
Yeah, it's like saying that we need to go through difficult times
Right.
in order to emerge stronger and wiser.
Can you recall a time when a challenge led to a positive outcome for you?
Sure. I mean, I think most of my biggest learning experiences have come from challenges.
Yeah.
It's when we're pushed outside of our comfort zone
Right,
that
yeah.
we really grow.
And his Scarecrow series, inspired by Günter Grass, seems to connect to themes of metamorphosis.
Right. The scarecrow is this figure that's caught between worlds.
Yeah.
It's a symbol of transformation.
What personal transformations have you experienced that resonate with that?
Well, I think we're all constantly evolving
Yeah.
and changing.
Right.
And sometimes that process can be messy and uncomfortable.
But it's ultimately necessary.
Yeah, it's how we grow.
He used text in his drawings, not just for information, but as part of the puzzle.
Right. It adds another layer of meaning.
How does text change your perception of a visual artwork?
Well, it makes me think about the relationship between words and images
Okay.
and how they can work together to create meaning.
And his later work involved these interwoven drawings and watercolors.
With hidden imagery.
He was always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, it sounds like he was constantly experimenting.
Yeah, and trying new things.
He had this belief that there are no mistakes and that we are always doing our best.
That's a very compassionate perspective.
It is.
Yeah.
How might you apply that to a current challenge?
Well, I'm trying to be more forgiving of myself
Okay.
and to recognize that I'm doing the best I can.
Even when things don't go as planned.
Exactly.
He even touches on a holographic view of reality and the importance of cooperation for a clearer picture.
He's saying that we all have a piece of the puzzle
Right.
and that we need to work together.
To see the whole picture.
Exactly.
How does this idea of interconnectedness influence your interactions with others?
Well, it makes me more aware of the impact of my actions.
Okay.
And it makes me want to be more collaborative.
And this idea of time travel at the speed of enlightenment.
That's a mind-blowing concept.
It is. What does enlightenment mean to you? Well, I think it's about transcending our limitations and seeing the world from a higher perspective.
How might that relate to your perception of time?
I think when we're enlightened,
Yeah.
time seems to slow down
Okay.
or even stop altogether.
He uses the hawk and the snake as metaphors for different approaches to life.
Right. The hawk is all about soaring above
Yeah.
and taking a broad view.
And the snake is more grounded.
Yeah, more patient.
Do you see yourself as more of a hawk or a snake?
I think I'm a bit of both.
Okay.
It depends on the situation.
And the concepts of a cycle of existence and a path of return. These speak to some pretty deep philosophical ideas.
Yeah, it's like the idea of reincarnation.
Right.
That we keep coming back.
Until we learn our lessons.
Exactly.
How do these cyclical ideas resonate with you?
Well, I'm not sure if I believe in reincarnation,
Okay.
but I do believe that life is a journey and that we're all on a path of growth and evolution.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there's his Mr. Peanut persona.
And his eventual move toward complete anonymity.
It's like he was playing with the idea of identity.
Yeah.
And the role of the artist.
What do you think it tells us about the value we place on artistic identity?
Well, I think we live in a culture that's obsessed with celebrity,
Yeah.
and that often the artist's personality overshadows their work.
So by choosing anonymity,
Yeah.
he's forcing us to focus on the art itself.
Exactly.
Now it seems like Camblin's art and philosophy have some interesting connections to Zen Buddhism and the I Ching.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap there.
His emphasis on mindfulness, the acceptance of impermanence, finding beauty and simplicity in imperfection.
The idea of wabi-sabi.
Yeah, all of that really resonates with Zen principles.
And the I Ching is all about change.
Right.
And the interplay of opposites.
Which we see reflected in Camblin's work as well.
Absolutely.
The Coast Study artwork is a great example of this, when we interpret it through the lens of Zen and the I Ching.
What's so fascinating about Coast Study is that it's such a simple image. Right, just sea stacks and cliffs.
Yeah, but it's so rich in meaning.
From a Zen perspective, the sea symbolizes the vastness and constant flux of the mind, while the enduring rocks represent inner stability.
The steadfastness that we can cultivate amidst life's changes.
And the delicate grasses and windswept trees clinging to the cliffs further emphasize that Zen idea of finding beauty in imperfection and fragility.
That wabi-sabi aesthetic.
And then when we look at it through the lens of the I Ching, with the water potentially representing danger and depth, and the rocks representing stillness and stability.
We get a glimpse into hexagram 39, obstruction.
And how to overcome it.
Yeah, the enduring sea stacks symbolize the strength to withstand difficulties.
While the surrounding waves represent the ever-changing nature of those challenges.
Exactly.
And the composition also seems to echo hexagram 52, keeping still mountain.
Yeah, where the stillness and grounding of the mountain are necessary to face those obstructions with clarity.
So it's like this artwork becomes a visual representation of navigating life's difficulties with resilience and inner peace.
Exactly, and it's a beautiful reminder that we need to be both grounded and flexible in how we respond to change.
Now, Camblin's artistic journey itself was pretty varied, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, he was constantly experimenting and evolving.
He started with abstract expressionism and then moved into this style called mouches volantes.
Right, which is French for flying flies.
Okay.
Or it can also refer to those little spots you see floating in your vision.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen those.
It's a very evocative name for an art style.
It is. What can you tell us about his early influences?
Well, he was influenced by a wide range of artists and movements,
Okay.
from old masters to Impressionism to Dada and surrealism.
It's like he was absorbing everything he could.
Yeah, and then synthesizing it into something new and unique.
He also had some formative experiences during his Fulbright scholarship in Italy.
Yeah, he was exposed to a whole new world of art and culture.
He visited the Uffizi Gallery and the Capuchin Catacombs in Palermo.
Yeah, which are both pretty intense places.
I can imagine. So how did mouches volantes come about?
Well, it was a departure from his earlier work.
Okay.
It was more abstract and experimental.
I would plead with optical illusions.
Yeah, he was interested in challenging the viewer's perception.
He also collaborated with other artists like Earl Staley and Joe Tate. And those events they held sound really interesting.
They were all about the creative process.
So it wasn't just about the end result.
No, it was about the journey.
The exploration.
Exactly.
Do you think that collaborative spirit influenced his later anonymity?
I think so, because it shows that he was willing to let go of his ego.
Right.
And to work together with others to create something new.
That's really cool. And his innovative blending of drawing and watercolor sounds like it created these really unique works.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to experiment with different media.
And he even built corrections into his early drawings.
Yeah, it's like he was showing us his thought process.
Which is pretty rare.
Yeah, most artists try to hide their mistakes.
But he embraced them.
Yeah, he saw them as part of the creative process.
Now, we also need to talk about this book, The Art of Everything.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book.
It sounds like a central piece in understanding his philosophy.
It's described as a conversation between art and philosophy,
Okay.
posing questions through images rather than providing answers.
And it features these recurring motifs, like the figure 4 trap, the tattooed arm, and the still frog.
Right, each one with its own symbolic meaning.
What do you think those symbols represent?
Well, the figure 4 trap is a symbol of entanglement,
Okay.
the unseen forces that shape our lives,
The tattooed arm represents unspoken history.
the permanence of the past,
And the still frog,
embodies a kind of effortless wisdom.
like a Zen master.
Exactly.
The book also highlights this idea of paradoxes made visible in his drawings. Trap structures that don't move.
It's like he's playing with our expectations of reality.
Yeah, he's making us question what we think we know.
And the book explores themes of illusion, the traps we create for ourselves, and the power of stillness.
It sounds like a real mind bender.
It is, but it's also very rewarding.
And the review makes it clear that the book isn't about giving you answers.
No, it's about asking questions.
Provoking thought and introspection.
Exactly.
Finally, let's touch on Camblin's legacy and influence.
He was a very respected artist.
Even if he wasn't widely known.
Right, he didn't seek fame or fortune.
But he had a profound impact on those who knew him.
Absolutely.
We hear from fellow artists like Earl Staley, who was mentored by Camblin, and Penny Serling, who talks about his collaborative spirit.
And George O. Jackson Jr., who describes his art as a portal to a deeper experience.
Even art collectors like Carolyn Farb speak of the joy his work brings.
It's clear that he touched a lot of lives.
And the book, Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, is a testament to that.
Yeah, it's an attempt to share his vision with a wider audience.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what are your final thoughts on Bob Camblin?
Well, I think he was a true original.
Yeah.
An artist who was not afraid to challenge conventions.
And to explore the big question. He invites us to do the same.
To look beyond the surface.
To embrace paradox.
And to find deeper meaning in the everyday.
If you're curious to learn more,